Welcome back to the Interact Post. Today, Article 5 will include us going over and discussing leaks related to Genshin. Once again, we do want to say that all of the info we have found, you can find yourself. We are not beta testers and have no inside information. We will be using various sources that everyone has access to. Now with all that out of the way, onto the video. So the first speculation that we're going to be looking at is the banner changes that we've been constantly getting for the past few weeks, and that's just looking at 4.3, who's actually going to be in it. We've already kind of seen a solidification, or at least it's been solidified, that Navia and Raiden are going to be on the second half of 4.3, getting that new 5-star character, but the first half has been changing a lot. At this point, we've been getting Ito and Ayaka, then it's switched to Albedo and Ayaka, then back to Ito, Ayaka. Now, once again, we're back at Albedo, Ayaka for the first half, and then Navia and Raiden for the second half. Now, this makes a little bit more sense considering Albedo has had a longer time since his last rerun. So I think we both personally think that at this point in time, it's probably going to be Albedo with Ayaka, especially with, her new skin and whatnot, and then getting into Navia and Raiden, getting another Archon with there, as well as the rerun, which seems like a very strong second half.
Yeah, definitely not seeing Ito in 4.3, I think would be okay just because Navia is present in this upcoming patch, and so removing Ito as another Geo DPS kind of just makes sense. But at the same time, it's been a while since he's been around himself, so maybe seeing him maybe alongside one of the new characters in 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, whatever happens, will definitely be okay. So I'm definitely excited for 4.3 banners.
Yeah, I think that's going to be great. So the next speculation that we saw was the new TCG cards that we're going to get in 4.3. And at first, I thought this was like a bogus leak, and then I kind of thought about it. But the first TCG 4.3 new card that we were going to get is La Senora. Now, at first I was like, okay, well, okay, spoiler. Well, I don't know. It's been a little while, but hopefully if you played enough of the game, she's kind of dead, so it'd be kind of difficult to actually get a TCG card as a playable character. But then I realized she is a boss, so obviously at some point they were going to throw her in. And looking at some of the other cards as well, it makes sense. Next is Alhaitham, which personally I'm extremely excited for. Not only because I just love Alhaitham, I really, really want to see how they use his mirrors to actually play in a card's effect.
Yeah, like maybe when you use his burst, you get these mirrors on your character's card, and then maybe if you switch characters, they wouldn't transfer over, but maybe some kind of damage bonus to Dendro as a whole. Maybe it would be more selfish. I'm thinking that maybe using some good supportive character cards, so maybe Beta will be good with this, or just Fischl, Raiden's card. So there's definitely some exciting setups I can see people have fun with.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at the next card was Goro, which, I don't know, I think a little bit more help with constant maybe Geo, maybe get some crystallized, help with a lot of shielding and whatnot for a lot of the different teams. Linny and Lynette are obviously going to be coming back, which is kind of cool considering it kind of feels like, I don't know, it's almost like Fontaine has been very rapidly. We're already kind of quote unquote deep in Fontaine at this point.
Yeah, and I'm still so far back on story. It's just been going so fast. So that does resonate with me too.
And to see the new card already come out, and Alhaitham had come out a long time ago, so it's funny to see how his card is coming alongside theirs. It's kind of cool. But next is looking at Yelan, which that's just basically an upgraded Xingqiu, and I really want to see if she can do maybe even more damage than him, maybe some different application, maybe even while she has her burst going, it also increases the person who uses
that's kind of what I was thinking,
damage more.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe you use her to give more damage to your on-fielder. Who knows? Again, going back to that Alhaitham card, might be good to use with her. Get
right.
Some kind of bloom thing going in TCG, because I know you cause a bloom core in TCG, you just increase the next damage of Pyro and Electro, so maybe you can have some kind of cool Hyper Bloom Virgin type thing going. Yeah,
exactly. And then looking at Layla and Dvalin and Ajdaha and the Thunder Manifestation, Layla's going to be really cool, just another shield to have in the game, and maybe just in general, maybe some good stuff that she can do, maybe just maybe more hits off field, in those bursts.
And this cryo application can be pretty valuable, especially in TCG. The application can make or break the game.
And then Dvalin and Ajdaha, seems like, at least fighting them, I have no clue what to really think of for how we're going to be able to fight them, but at least to use them, it seems really, really cool, considering Ajdaha is basically just, another really, really strong Geo shield character, it seems like. And Dvalin, another really great Animo character, maybe even to use as a TCG card on your own team to maybe swap out with some other cards. And then the Thunder of Manifestation, very similar to how I feel like the Hypostasis is.
Electro Hypostasis.
Yeah.
I had the same thought there.
So I think all the cards are really, really cool. I think if there's this many cards to come out as well, it'll be really interesting to see what can come out and
For
how.
sure. And if there's that many new playable characters, those are all just like playable cards. So there's probably going to be a lot of new weapon cards, artifact cards, all kinds of different support cards. It'll be cool to kind of see. It seems like a lot is coming, so.
The next leak we saw was looking at Alice, actually, and one of the people in the Hexen Circle, and Alice specifically knowing as Klee's mom, coming out in late 4 point whatever, or early Natlan, which is 5 point. So at this point, I'm thinking, for me, I know a lot of people are thinking it makes more sense for her to pop in during Natlan, you know, most likely considering that she's a Pyro character, it makes a little bit more sense how it could fit in the role. And as much as I agree with that, at the same time, my mind immediately goes back to new characters, even with a constant reoccurrence of Klee coming back on the summertime events. Why not have Alice come out in late Fontaine, which is 4.7-ish, and have that come around with Alice as well, maybe even on the same banner, maybe kick Eula to the curb for once, and have maybe, you know, Alice with her daughter, with Klee.
That would be really cool, actually.
Right.
And I could see them doing that like with a summer event right before, you know, because we usually have a summer event right before going into the next new area. So that's just how it kind of rolls out. So that would be a cool little banner. That's definitely like not set in stone at all, but that would be cool and seems believable. So
yeah, I'd love to actually see what's going to be happening, but we'll have to see actually in the future if that's been a thing. People have been saying for like 2 years that they think that, you know, Alice is coming soon, so we'll see. But next, looking at the biggest part of what this video is probably going to be most about, we finally got a lot more of a in-depth study or an in-depth look at Navia and Chevreus's kits. Last week we talked a little bit about their kits and getting as much information that we could possibly capture. Now finally we're going to be actually getting to look into their full entire kit. So first, now looking at Navia, her normal attack isn't anything special. Now what I do know is that her weapon is absolutely amazing, which we'll talk about in a second as well. That looks awesome. It's like a battle axe. Super happy about that. But looking at her normal attack, her charge attack, her plunging attack, nothing really different in terms of like what's actually going to be like different than normal characters. It's just going to be your normal hits and normal attacks that are going to be happening. But her skill does seem like it's going to be kind of interesting. And this is going to be when a character in the party obtains an elemental shard created from the crystallized reaction, Navia will gain 1 charge of crystal shrapnel. At this point, basically, Navia can grab up to 6 charges of this, so anytime any character in the party picks up an elemental shard, or basically a crystallized shard that they get from the crystallized reaction, she's going to be getting these charges of crystal shrapnel. And then when she uses her skill or fires her skill, she's going to consume all of the crystal shrapnel charges that she has with her skill, and it's basically acts like a gun, and that's going to be doing more damage the more charges that you have. And this is also going to allow extra like shard shots or extra like bits of damage after the initial hit if you have more charges of the 6 charges that you can get up to in the crystal shrapnel all at once. So I think the skill is going to be kind of interesting to actually see. You're going to be kind of doing a lot, and the skill is actually going to be coming at the end, which is kind of interesting because usually a lot of characters have their skill at the beginning and then their burst or whatever. So I think she's going to be focusing on getting like probably her burst first, which we'll see why later or whatever, but then having all that geo damage and, you know, creating that reaction and then picking up all these shrapnels and then doing her skill to do kind of some big hits. It also seems like she has 2 initial uses of her skill at C0. So that's also kind of cool, kind of like Zhao, how he can do 2 of his Lemonastic cycling at the same time, like 2 of them. I think that's
she just
kind of
inherently has 2 charges.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Now looking at her burst, a lot of the people are kind of making fun of Navia a little bit because she looks like she came from the great land of USA and decided that she just was going to have a naval bombardment from the sidelines. So basically what we're seeing from here, we at least are seeing that she's going to be doing some like sort of salute where she's just waiting for this massive bombardment of geo damage of just basically these bunch of explosions. If you want to think of it, it's basically like having like 30 Zhonglis use their ults at the same time or intermittently using their ults. It's just constant huge geo just hits from who knows where, the skies. Like that's legitimately what's been happening. It's going to be doing a lot of AoE geo damage and providing a lot of, fire support at least. I think the best thing for this is that it's going to be 12 seconds long. So that is 12 seconds of pure geo damage and a 15-second cooldown and only a 60 energy cost burst. So not a lot of energy that you need for her burst, which means that she can put out a lot of application. Never mind her passive that we're going to talk about in a second where she gets an infusion. But at the same time, you're going to be doing a lot of geo, which is why I say you're probably going to want to use your burst first, get a lot of that geo off, have a lot of maybe extra, doing a lot of damage with some other characters or just a lot of application with other characters to create crystallized shards, pick up all the crystallized shards, go back to your skill, use an instance of it to get that really big skill hit, and then wait, you probably have time to wait for the burst to end again and pick up 6 more. So I think it's going to be very, very good for a lot of things to just happen for her to pick up these crystallized shards.
Right.
It helps a lot more teams to, at least for Navia, I really, really do think that she's going to be changing a lot of how at least she could make Geo different and why a lot of people are going to be going after her, even if they didn't like Geo, because now they can actually use other characters and they are encouraged to actually use these characters to help her
For sure.
instead of other Geo characters.
Yeah, and to kind of bounce off, I think you were kind of already saying it in a way, but I think this is going to be good as having a long duration of just hitting Geo. And because if this can happen off field, which I think it will, it's going to be great for using her burst and then switching to all your other 3 characters, right? And setting up their stuff to support Navia. Because while you're setting all that up, if her burst is sitting off field, hitting all that geo, you're going to be causing a lot of crystallize while you're just setting up to get ready for Navia. So I think that, and the reason I say that is because you can't have a geo aura on an enemy. So you want to, to create crystallize, you have to hit the geo on top of it, the aura of a different element, because there's no geo aura. You don't apply geo to an enemy. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't work. So having just a lot of geo hits and application on field with an infusion, which we'll talk about, and off field with her burst, you can just have endless constant crystallized reactions happening for setup on Navia. So I think that's just another good thing to point out. And again, a 12-second duration on the burst just seems really good with only 3-second downtime. And again, like you're saying, the infusion just gonna be a lot of geo. It's gonna be a lot of geo, and it's gonna be great.
Now looking at her passive talent, and this is probably the biggest one, I think why I'm like extremely excited for it, is because for 4 seconds after using your skill, basically, the damage dealt by Navia is going to be all of her normal attack, charge attack. She's basically going to be getting an infusion of geo after she uses her skill for 4 seconds. And I think that's going to be really great because all of those damage numbers as well are going to be increased by 40%. So her normal attack damage and whatever is going to be increased already by geo, and her geo damage bonus or whatever that you're getting the increase from as well. Not only that, her damage in and of itself is going to be increased by 40%. Never mind every other buff you're probably going to have stacked on top of her. All of this to say that she's going to have even more geo application in between, that time period of using in between the skills, because what that allows you to do is, if you're, like you were talking about, with your supports happening off field, their time period is probably at this point probably going to be longer than the 12-second duration of Navia's burst. And that means all that application is still on the field, which means there's no more geo and you're on Navia, but maybe you don't have your burst back or whatever. You use your skill, or you don't want to take the time to use your burst again, use your skill, you've now got this immediate usage of the shrapnel hits, which, by the way, her burst also gives 1 charge of that crystal shrapnel that we were talking about from her skill that you use to actually gain 6 of those charges and hit. If you hit an enemy, you then get 1 charge of crystal shrapnel. So you can basically already have all 6 charges without even necessarily creating that reaction.
Right, so you would use her burst. It's kind of what I'm seeing in my head, how it's playing out. You would use her burst at the beginning of rotation to get that going, and that's building up her shrapnel charges even from off field. is
Right.
what I'm hoping. And so while that's her burst is going and giving her those shrapnel, you're also going through your other 3 supports, setting them up, and then once you get back to Navia, I'm thinking you use her skill at that point because you'll have the charges, and then you can use her skill at the tail end of the burst because the burst has only 3-second downtime, so that's when you're using the infusion for still applying Geo and dealing Geo damage, and then you use the burst immediately and go through your supports again.
The thing that I think is actually probably very similar, I just think you're probably going to do it a little bit different, is using your burst, having all your supports go, and while that's all happening, you're probably going to be using your skill as quick as possible with Navia, but you remember you have 2 charges, and so you're probably, if anything, going to be popping your burst, hitting a bunch of opponents, especially if there's multiple opponents at once. There's probably going to be a way for us to track the 6 different shrapnel charges that you're going to be getting, and tracking that so that you can figure out that you can probably use your skill after you use your burst, and then you can probably go into your supports and whatnot, and then still have that second skill after your entire rotation, for then you to go into Navia and just do the 4 seconds of normal attack, charge attacks, plunging attacks, whatever, with the infusion of Geo, and then you probably have your skill back again. I mean, technically you could just keep going, and then yes, you at that point, hopefully with enough energy needs that you have, you should have your burst back, and with only 60 energy costs, once again, it's going to be very easy to get her burst back. So I think she's going to be a very easy player to play with.
Yeah.
As long as this doesn't change, you know, things can change, beta changes, all these stuff can just go out the window. So for right now, it seems very, very good.
Yeah, so the other thing is, like, just looking over her kit, she seems like she's going to be very, you know, again, like you're saying, easy to play. She's very fast in rotation, if you know what I mean. Like, with her burst having a cooldown of 15 seconds, only 3 seconds downtime, her infusion is 4 seconds after you use the skill, but you have 2 charges, so, you know, technically you have 8 seconds of an infusion. You can chain those together. She's just going to be constantly putting out. My only, and it's not a concern I have, it's just like, maybe a certain way you want to play her is just like using the burst, going through your supports, and then even just using both charges of the skill, not consecutively. Like, use the first one, do your 4 seconds of infusion. Once you lose it, use the skill again, and then go through characters again, because I feel like she's going to cause the supports to not be able to keep up with her. What I mean by that is, like, using Farina's skill or Fischl's skill, they're still going to be on cooldown by the time you get back to them if Navia is just going to be that fast and going through rotation so fast that you can't use your skill again once you go through your supports. They're still on cooldown, kind of a thing.
Looking at her next passive talent, it says that for each Pyro, Electro, Cryo, or Hydro party member, Navia gains 20% increased attack, and this effect can stack up twice. So you can get 40% more attack for just having other characters that aren't Geo. Once again, I really, really think that at this point it's going to make a lot more people be happy with Geo. A lot of people have been asking for Geo to just be different for once and just not have a 4-man Geo team.
Well, here's the answer.
And here, and yeah, exactly. And here it is. Navia is going to change a lot of people. It's changed my mind a lot about Geo. I'm not going to lie to you. At this point, I was thinking, you know, I don't really want Geo really on my account. Probably really ever necessarily to have a main damage dealer or whatever. There's just so many other options, especially with how Dendro came out. There's way, in my opinion, way better options almost sometimes to just have other characters than just trying to slap together a goated Ito team and just trying to get every perfect character for him in that 4-man team.
Exactly, and the thing with those is for those to be as good as or placed on the same tier in settings of like the Abyss, that required such high investment. You're talking like C6 Goros, you have obviously the Bennett's in there, Albedo or Zhongli, either one, and then your Ito at multiple constellation in the weapon. That's when it's like, okay, this is actually on par with the other stuff. Just because Geo's reaction, you know, crystallized isn't a damage reaction, so Geo has to be straight up damage. So it puts it more on the realm of like physical, if that makes sense, because there's no amplifying reactions out of Geo. It's just you got to build up the damage of the Geo hits themselves for it to actually become viable or on par with other things. So here we're actually seeing for the first time how other elements, instead of just giving you a shield, are actually helping to increase your damage.
Now, after talking about Navia, we're not going to go into her constellations just because that would take a lot more time, and we'll probably put that into a build guide when she comes out. At this point, looking at her weapon actually is going to be that battle axe that I was talking about earlier. It's going to have an extremely high base attack, which I'm happy for considering she scales a lot on attack, by the way, keep that in mind. Navia is going to be scaling on attack, not defense. She's unlike a lot of other Geo characters that just go heavily into defense. Now, I know Albedo can kind of go into both, and, you know, Noelle uses defense to stack into attack, but here, defense does legitimately nothing, or it does as much as it does to other characters. It just helps them defend more. It does not increase her damage, at least from what we see whatsoever.
Yeah, it's kind of like Ningguang. You don't build defense on Ningguang, it's full attack.
Exactly. So with this weapon, it seems it's going to be a crit rate main stat, and it's probably because Navia is going to be ascending into crit damage, which is very nice to see. And the base attack, like I said, was extremely high, probably around 674, and because of that, usually the crit rate is not usually as high in the 40s, it's usually at the 22.1% range. The ability on the weapon is going to be increasing attack by a flat amount of 20%, and then when characters in your party obtain elemental shards from crystallized reactions, those crystallized shards, the equipping character will gain 1 seal, which increases elemental skill damage by 18%. That seal lasts for 15 seconds, which is a very long time, and the equipper may have up to 2 seals at once. Just to make sure you guys know that, that is 36% more elemental skill damage. So when you pick up at least 2 shards, that first time that you do that huge hit on her skill, it's going to have 36% more damage.
It's very comfortable too with that 15-second duration, and we were just talking about how kind of like theoretically you'd play by using her burst and then going through your supports. That's allowing you to get crystallized just passively on those other characters. So you're gonna, if you have the weapon equipped on her, you're getting this without even thinking about it. You don't have to really change anything.
Now it seems like there is going to be a 4-star weapon that we are going to be getting from an event, and normally we usually get this when a new 5-star comes out. We usually get a 4-star weapon mostly from an event that can do pretty well for them. You know, we got Ballad of the Boundless Blue from
that's the one
for Nervalet.
I was just thinking about that one.
So, you know, I don't think Risley, if I'm thinking correctly, didn't really have an event specific weapon that was like amazing for him, and that may have just been Ballad of the Boundless Blue as well, but that one doesn't really help out too much. That's usually for Nervalet. So Risley kind of got skipped, but here, at least in 4.3, we're going to be getting an event that is going to be giving us a 4-star Claymore that does have energy recharge as a main stat. Now, we usually see this with the event weapons. It's not usually anything crazy good on the main stat for the character, but the ability, it's not that bad. At R1, at least, it increases the attack by 12%, and I believe at R5, which, if you probably, you know, get to R5 through the event. Right.
It should, what do you think? 24%?
I was going to say 24% from what we talked about earlier. It's probably going to be 24%. And then basically it seems like this is going to be like a Melazine event. So it just basically, the rest of the ability just talks about how you've helped the Melazines, and therefore now you're just getting an increase to your attack in general by 12% no matter what as well. So the 12% originally at R1, plus the additional 12% at the end, just cause, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. I'm sure there'll be some changes or whatnot from the actual weapon. But then at R5, it'll be 24 plus the original 12. That 12 at the end could turn to 24 as well. So it could be 24 plus 24, which is a 48% attack increase. With an energy recharge main stat, you probably don't even have to worry about energy in her artifacts whatsoever if you probably have that. Just because of all the reactions that you're going to be getting from the crystallized reaction.
Yeah, so it actually does look like a very decent option if you don't have her weapon or you're not planning to go for it. Because it is, you know, 565 base attack. As a 4-star, that's about as high as you can go. So, and again, because Navi scales on that attack, that's going to be very helpful. The energy is going to make your burst comfortable, and then all that increased attack in the passive. It's definitely a solid option.
Alright, well that just about covers everything in today's video, covering what we know so far about Navia. There will be a second part to this week's post, which we will upload tomorrow. It's going to go over what we've gathered so far on Chevreuse, and also give a little more insight into Cloud Retainer's kit as well. So subscribe if you'd like to see it. Once again, thanks so much to all of you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.